Hello, my friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. Well, we're looking first over here at Hawaii, where there's 17 quakes in 24-hour period. There's 251 quakes total. And, this feels like an uptick, particularly when we look at clustering off the coast like this. Because this is how it started last time with Kilauea's eruption. There was a cluster of quakes off the coast that built to the crescendo, and then boom. So just something I wanted to show you guys and make note of, because it could be a harbinger of some more activity coming. And otherwise, looking at significance, we have a 5.1 down in New Zealand. There was a 6.0, but you know what? The USGS is not showing it. We have a 5.2 down in New Zealand. There's definitely been a lot more covering up going on lately with the USGS. A 5.5 over in Indonesia. And we see a 4.8 over northeast of Greece. And we have a 5.2 on the central mid-Atlantic ridge. And when we jump over, check out the watchers. There's a lot of volcanic activity going on. So this would be a code red as far as aviation warning, eruption up to 50,000 feet in Papua New Guinea, back at Manam volcano. We have a strong explosion at Mount Popo in Mexico. Been very, very active. There's definitely a huge uptick going on right now. We could see it, and again, it's more particulates up in the air, and increased volcanic activity at Fuego, lava flows likely, and this is Guatemala. So we're seeing a lot of increased activity going on. And let's jump over here first. This is our volcano discovery map, where you could see the currently fully active, in full eruption volcanoes going on right now. And we see there's quite a few of them, and there's quite a few that are actually in partial eruption as well. And jumping back over, we have monsoonal conditions and cyclone developing in the north, and unusual wintry weather striking southwestern Australia. So, we were talking about Australia basically melting, melting away, right? And, it just hasn't stopped. Indonesia has been, I would think, just about the worst hit place on the planet. And Australia has been getting hit too, with a lot of interesting and severe weather. So severe weather warning for the northern Cape York Peninsula and Torres Strait Islands, with heavy rainfall, damaging winds, abnormally high tides with main impacts. Meanwhile, a new tropical cyclone is brewing near the coast of northern Western Australia, and unusual wild and wintry weather is striking its south. So water levels on today's high tide could exceed the highest tide of the year for some islands. Interesting stuff. It's extreme. It's extreme. And this is what we're seeing everywhere, is just massive extremes. And we have been talking about a lot of things. One of the things I want to talk about again is the unusual winds. Yesterday we went and we were up in Tennessee and basically helping a friend move. And interesting story that we'll tell you more about at a different time. But coming back here this morning, going and doing some stuff around here, I noticed there's another massive tree down in the back. And when you look at the tree on the inside, it's definitely been rotting. But we had some intense winds this morning, and just not even that long. They just kind of pop up out of nowhere, and like microbursts. And so, if you guys have been with me for a while, about 2 months ago, I think it was about two and a half months ago, I did a video showing where these big trees, 3-4 foot diameter trunks, were just knocked down like nothing by this microburst. And so, today or this morning, other ones came down, and they're huge. They're huge. And other people are noticing these unusually intense winds that come up out of nowhere. And this is my first experience living in the mountains, above 3,000 feet. And, I know out in the Rockies, you got mountains 10, 12,000 feet and better. But basically, for the most of my life, I've been a coastal person, close to the water. And for obvious reasons, I felt it was time to get away from the water. But yet, what we're seeing with the winds is just so unusual. And then while I was checking out the tree, walked a little bit farther down, noticed ginormous bear prints. And so a friend with me that has been out in the woods a lot and knows this stuff too, knows better than me, I think, as far as what bears' markings look like. But yeah, just verified a good-sized bear out there, probably 400 pounds or better by the depth and the span of the prints. So it was really interesting to see that. And so we're just seeing this extreme weather everywhere, incredible weather. And large storm to impact the Midwest into the east, deep freeze through the end of the month. And actually, when you look, I think this was the one that had the maps I was looking at too. Basically, no, it was a different spot. Basically, as far as, now we're getting into a little bit more typical for what we saw last year. It's going to be basically slightly warming in the west in February and cooling in the east. So we're going to get back into that split polar vortex thing we saw last year, which basically led to, the Great Lakes region all the way on down, the Midwest, the upper Midwest into the Northeast being pretty dang cold and a pretty severe winter. And that's probably what we're going to be looking at going into February now. Whereas the western U.S. has had, pretty good cold all winter, it might be warming up now over there a little bit. So we'll have to see. We'll have to watch because, the weather's crazy and it's getting more changeable all the time. We have excessive rainfall across northern Spain and the extreme amounts of snow for the Pyrenees Mountains till Friday, January 25th. And in the Pyrenees, in the next 48 hours, it's basically a textbook event that's going to happen. 150 to 250 millimeters of rainfall is possible across the Picos de Europe mountain ranges, the peaks of Europe, and up to 150 to 200 centimeters of fresh snow over the higher Pyrenees. This will strongly enhance snow avalanche threat. So be aware of that if you are in the area. And so this is interesting. This is 7 dangerous places to avoid when disaster strikes. And this is out of Urban Survival. And, check it out. I would strongly, urge you guys to check out this site, urbansurvivalsite.com. So major disasters have a way of bringing out the worst in some people, but also the best in others. You have to take that into account as well. I mean, a lot of times we've seen a lot of human angels, go and do amazing things as well. So on this article, it was kind of focusing a little bit on the negative, but, it brings both, and again, the extremities. Think about what's happening here because, I'm meeting a lot of people that are growing in extremely good ways through all the trials and tribulations that we are seeing happening. So where do you want to avoid? Hospitals, obviously, just because, obviously, there's more infections and infectious things in hospitals than anywhere, from staph and all different types of infections, especially if we do have a SHIT hitting the fan scenario. You just don't know what's going to be out there. So obviously you want to try to avoid the hospitals if you could. Airports, and we know airports are a target, a huge target. And then also just places where, can you imagine you're waiting for your flight and then all of a sudden the EMP hits or a CME hits and everything's lights out and you're stuck in an airport somewhere so far away from home. That would be one of the worst scenarios we could think of. So just, again, listen to your intuition, listen to that inner voice in your gut. I have found it, in my case, it's way more often right. Supermarkets. So a vast majority of people are unprepared for major disasters, do not have food and supplies stocked. This means the supermarket is going to be the first place that many people run to. Of course, the store won't have nearly enough product on hand to meet demand after a disaster, so many people may be willing to even, they say kill over the supplies you do have. Let's hope it's not that bad. Let's hope not, but you just don't know. And then you'll have other people that are going to be predatory too. I mean, if it is really a crazy case of, major things going on, you'll have people that be opportunistic, unfortunately, and look to, steal from you, rob you, mug you as you're making your way out of the supermarket, maybe to your car, to try to get your supplies. So be aware of things like that as well. Bridges and tunnels. Many disasters such as earthquakes, nuclear explosions, and more can damage the integrity of the infrastructure in the area, making places like bridges and tunnels a dangerous place to be. There's no way to know for sure whether or not these structures have been damaged and are on the brink of collapse. So when planning your bug-out route, it's best to avoid these structures as much as possible. Prisons. And, I've talked about Florida Marquis and the Venezuela thing, and the Venezuela thing will be the next video that we have out. There's one of his videos that has more views than anything. He was talking about a disaster that people don't realize is going to happen when the grid goes down, when, it hits the fan big time. How are they going to be able to keep 3 million people in American prisons? They're going to be faced with basically letting them starve to death or letting them go in many cases. And so you have to be aware of this as well, and just think about what's going to happen with the whole prison system if there is a CME or, if there is an EMP and if everything goes down. Oh, that's going to be craziness. So, avoid them at all cost, of course, because many of the people in there obviously are dangerous people. The wilderness. Now, this says many people have this romanticized idea that when disaster strikes, they will simply head into the wilderness and live off the land till things return to normal. However, bugging out into the woods with no other plan should be a last resort. And the reality is that surviving in the wilderness is much more difficult than it seems. Every single day is a battle to survive, and there's so many things that can kill you. And you'll only have a few days to find a source of water before you die of dehydration, and maybe less time than that to find shelter before you die of exposure. So there's so much to take in. And of course, wild animals, and you just don't know who you're going to run into. Again, those opportunistic people. There's less people out there, but again, the chances of running into somebody in the woods that is armed is higher. And because many people won't go out into the woods unless they are armed, just because of all the danger of animals, et cetera, snakes. There's so many things. Although I would still take the woods over an urban situation in many ways. So locations of riots, being aware of that, and you don't want to be anywhere where there's a riot because it's just mob rules, and we've seen it time and time again. We've seen it in France, we've seen it everywhere. What happens when the mob rules, and it gets to be craziness, and you just don't want to be anywhere near that. So that's another thing to consider. And so this is just touching on the floods in Australia. And again, it just comes on suddenly. And so this is Canberra, and this was hit with its second thunderstorm in 2 days on Wednesday, flooding parts of the Hyperdome and hammering the suburb with hail. And it's just crazy weather swings, intense flooding going on everywhere we look. And so this is out of the Express, which is often exceedingly dramatic, but still, we do have a solar storm that could hit tomorrow. And as it says here, solar storm traveling at 600 kilometers per second to hit tomorrow. It's barreling towards the Earth. And when we're talking about CMEs, and we're talking about EMPs, and we're talking about losing the grid, this is one of the major things that will probably happen at some point, and it will happen. I think it's just a case of when, and that will probably be one of the things that is going to take the grid down. So whether it's that first or whether it's an EMP that's human induced, we can't say. But most definitely at some point we're going to lose the grid. So it's a matter of being prepared, and also having your support in place, friends, family, loved ones, neighbors. Get to know people. Have layers of support in place, because it's much harder to survive just by yourself than it is when you have a support network. So my friends, as always, I look forward to your comments. Please do subscribe, click the bell, get all the notifications, join our family, share, thumbs up to support the family as well. Stay safe out there, stay alert and aware. God bless and namaste.